Comics will break you hot, kid. Those are the words of the great Jack Kirby, who is unfortunately, sadly, lesser known to the general public than Stan Lee, but was instrumental in creating so many of the great iconic characters that populate our movie screens and toy shelves these days. Characters like Captain America, the Fantastic Four, the New Gods. I could go on, but I'm not going to because we are here today to begin a discussion of creating your own comic book. What does it take? What do you need to do? I've done it, and I want to share that information with you. I've been lucky enough to crowdfund my comic, Six Gun Gorilla, Long Days of Vengeance, link down below. Yeah, excuse the new mic setup. I'm still getting used to this. Boy, I'm looking professional, ain't I? With the spit guard and everything. But anyway, check out the link below. We're in demand. We're still kicking booty. And I am extremely grateful to everybody, to all the backers, to all the people in CG who have been immensely helpful in getting the word out. But I really feel like now I want to start giving something back. So I know there are a lot of people out there who would love to do a comic, are intimidated by the idea, don't know where to start. Okay, well, what's the best place to start? Like Charles Dickens said in David Copperfield, at the beginning. Where does it begin? It begins with the script. It begins with your story. Have a story to tell. Tell it as best as you can, as succinctly as you can. As straightforward as you can. Certainly if you're a beginner. When it comes to choosing a story, if you don't have one, well, then you're in trouble. If you're a creative-minded person, if you're already a writer, you may have a bunch of ideas. Which idea do you pursue? You pursue the one that haunts you, the one that sticks with you, the one that you know is going to hold your attention for the long haul. Because trust me, making a comic book, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So before you decide on what comic you're going to do, what story you're going to tell, make sure that it's one that you're passionate about, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with that story and with those characters. And I'm talking about years, not just months, potentially. So when it comes to writing the script, well, for one thing, you want to do your research. That doesn't just mean research into, say, for instance, the time period that you're writing your story in. If you're a complete newbie to writing comic book scripts, there are certain books I want to recommend. Most books on writing, and I read a lot of them, aren't really that useful. I'll pick one up every now and then and read it and enjoy it, but it's very rare that I could say that I got something practical out of it. I'm going to recommend a couple of books for you to start with. Here's Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. Now, I think you've probably heard of this. This is the book that inspired George Lucas when he was writing Star Wars. Where to even begin? This is an absolute classic, rightfully so, unlike, here, there's a little shine there on the cover. Anyway, Joseph Campbell, Hero of a Thousand Faces. It's all about Jungian archetypes, which is to say, why is it that we feel the need to be told the same stories over and over and over again? And also the miraculous, crossover that you see from all these different cultures from around the world, the same basic story being told over and over again. The hero and the hero's quest, the call to adventure, denying the call to adventure, arming himself with magic weapons, facing the Threshold Guardians. That's all in here. Check it out. It's all, and it's not a drudgery to read. It's Joseph Campbell was an academic, but he didn't write like an academic. You can see all the little bookmarks in here. Yeah, this is one of my go-tos. I always keep it on my desk when I'm writing. Another good one is The Writer's Journey, mythic structure for storytellers and screenwriters. This one is very Jungian. When I say Jungian, of course, I'm referring to the great Carl Jung, the psychologist who was Freud's protege. But unlike Freud, was very much a mystic, and was the one who explored what he referred to as the shadow self. He was also the one who came up with the concept of the anima and the animus. That's to say, the woman that's in every man, the man that's in every woman. Yeah, this is also extremely useful. Another one I want to recommend is Poetics by Aristotle. That you can just download for free. It's way over 2,000 years old. So yeah, it's in the public domain. That's about 50 pages. Read it, memorize it. Extremely useful. Another one that's great is Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. What's great about this, aside from the fact that it's in comic book format, if you could see that, is the fact that he explores what's actually happens in your head when you're reading a comic book. A lot of people don't know how to read a comic book these days, which is to say they don't know where their eye is supposed to go. He really explores a lot of what goes on inside your head, stuff that you really may not have thought of. But once you're creating comics, you really kind of want to know about this stuff. And I know, if you're thinking, I don't want to follow the rules, I want to break the rules, that's cool. But before you break the rules, you got to learn the rules. Picasso, before he started doing all of his Cubist stuff, was a proper, quote unquote, I hate the term, fine artist. So yeah, check that out. Another useful one, if you're talking about just straight nuts and bolts, is the DC Comics Guide to Writing Comics by the great Dennis O'Neil, who is probably best known for being the guy who gave Batman back his dignity. Terrific writer. He was the Batman editor for 30 years? Nobody really is a greater authority on the character than him. Check it out. Like I said, nuts and bolts, very, very useful. Okay, so from there, when it comes to actually sitting down and writing your damn comic, what else do you want to do? You want to do certainly your research when it comes to that is, if you're not writing a science fiction story set 5,000 years in the future. If you're writing a period piece, do your research. I wrote a screenplay, which I would love to do as a comic, and it started out as a comic in my head, called Tequila Moonrise, which is about the Mexican wrestling luchador culture. And the villain in that is a Aztec mummy vampire named Tizok. So I decided, well, I didn't really know much about the Aztecs, but I had a friend, my friend Charles, who is a former archaeology major. I asked him, well, what are some good books to read about the Aztecs? He recommended some, went to the library, picked them up, read them. You're not going to use, now this is the interesting thing about research, you're not going to use about 99% of what you read, but that's okay, because it's going to be that 1% of stuff that you do use that's going to make your project pop and feel that much more authentic. So be like Chuck Dixon, do your homework, do your research. Because there's always somebody that's going to be out there that's gonna notice that you messed something up, and they're going to be happy to point it out to you. All right. From there, writing your script, what software do you use? I use Final Draft, which is screenwriting software. But you can use anything. You can use Word is another program I'll sometimes use. What's great about a program like Final Draft is that it automatically formats your page for you. Speaking of format, don't worry about format. This is something that wannabe screenwriters obsess over. Don't obsess over it at all. When it comes to format, Marvel style versus full script, learn about that stuff, but don't feel obliged to do anything but the way that you want to do it yourself. It's all about communicating with your artist, because remember, your script is really ultimately only going to be read by one person, well, two people really mainly, and that's the artist and the letterer. Now, when it comes to your artist, what's great about writing for comics is that you can directly address your artist. You can put in little notes like, hey man, you might want to check out this movie, or hey, here's a link to this picture of the gun that I'm talking about so he can get it right, he or she. It's very helpful. It's also worth mentioning that writing for comics is the hardest kind of writing in the world. I say this relatively confidently because everybody that's come from other fields, writing novels, screenplays, whatever, who then tries doing a comic book, they all say the same thing, which is that it's the hardest style of writing. And I think that's because it's the most unnatural form of storytelling. And that is because you're telling a story in snapshots. That is to say, in a screenplay, you're describing what's happening as it's happening. In a novel, you could be present tense, past tense. With a comic book, you're taking snapshots, and that's something that doesn't come naturally. As someone that comes from a background of writing prose, of writing short stories and screenplays, novellas, I found that I had to develop a whole new set of muscles without losing the old ones. But don't be intimidated. It may take you 4 or 5 first scripts before you finally get it. But once you do, it's a piece of cake, like bicycling downhill. If you're having a discipline issue, actually turning out the pages, set a limit for yourself. It can be a page a day, 2 pages a day, or you could do what I used to do when I was having real problems, which was I followed the example of the legendary screenwriter Walter Hill, who did 48 Hours, The Long Riders, The Driver, a bunch of classics. His method is to sit down in front of the typewriter or word processor and sit there for an hour a day. And if you're just sitting there for an hour with nothing but a blank screen in front of you, you're going to get bored pretty quickly and want to fill it. He's also very strict in that once that hour is over, boom, he stops, even if he's right in the middle of a sentence. So that way, even though he wants to keep going, he doesn't. And so the script is still percolating inside him and ready to burst out the next day. I find this can be a really, really helpful technique to use if you're stuck. When it comes to style, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with imitating other writers. You can. Most writers start out imitating other writers. You read early Stephen King. Early Stephen King reads like H.P. Lovecraft. A lot of early H.P. Lovecraft reads a lot like really bad Poe. It's normal to start out imitating another writer. At the same time, you want to write as yourself because you're the only one that can do you. When I started Six Gun Gorilla, there was a point where I thought to myself, you know what? Boy, I could really do this Garth style, where he's like ripping people's heads off or pulling people's arms off and beating them with their own arms and, tearing their legs off and jamming them up their rear ends. But then I thought, well, why do I want to do Garth Ennis? As much as I admire him as a writer, for the most part, why would I want to do Garth Ennis when I'm the only one that can do me? Why don't I do me? And so that's exactly what I did, and it paid off. People actually love my comic, and I don't say that to boast. I say that with the utmost gratitude, because when you sit down to write a story, you don't know if other people are going to get it or not. You need to write and you can't worry about that. You have to write the story that you want to read. Write the comic that you want to read. It's really as simple as that. Are other people going to get it? I don't know. In my case, I figured, well, some people would get it, other people wouldn't. I got extremely lucky. The critics were super kind to me. Everybody who reads the comic seems to really like it. Once again, not bragging, grateful. When it comes to editing, be ruthless. Show it to people who are mean. That is to say, show it to people who are not going to be worried about hurting your feelings. And you really need to set your fifis aside. Don't think about your script as something that is a part of you. It's outside of you now. It is its own thing. And try to approach it that way. Try to approach it as objectively as possible. Now, sometimes that means setting it aside for a little while and then picking it up and reading it. But if you also want to get feedback from people, make sure they're not people that are going to stroke your ego. You want them to be as honest as possible. And remember, this is still the time where you can change things. You want to make sure that your script is as good as it can possibly be before you send it to your artist. So anything else I want to add? Not off the top of my head. Next up, I'm going to do a video about finding an artist and what it's like to work with an artist. If you have any questions, anything else you would like me to elaborate on, mention it in the comments below. And I wish you luck. I wish you luck on your comic. I wish you luck on your venture if this is something that you want to pursue. It's not easy. Like Jack said, it can, comics will break your heart, but it can also be immensely rewarding. Not just for the work itself, not just for the yield, hopefully, but also the world that it'll introduce you to. Conventions, networking with other artists. I'm going to do videos about those as well. So anyway, until then, I wish you peace, love, and soul. Audi 5000.